What's going on, Dragons? Happy Friday. As always, I'm your co-host, Cory, and welcome to episode 39 of the EDH, our weekly conversation about all things Magic the Gathering. With me today, as always, on the Dragon's Den is my co-host, Cole.
How's it going, 39ers? I guess this will make a little more sense in 10 episodes, the 49ers, but I thought I'd try it out.
No, I thought it was smooth. Real smooth. I don't know of what, but it was smooth.
How are you doing,
How's your
Cory?
week?
Yeah, let's let you answer first this time.
Man, it took 39 episodes to get you to ask. Thank you.
But I've only been in the last 32, so
I'm doing pretty good. I actually had a really cool kind of moment this past weekend that I think you would really appreciate. So our friend Kyle, or Cowboy Kyle, for those of you listening at home that may or may not know him, he had like an event. So he invited some of us from around the state. Some people actually flew in from other states, stuff like that, for some weekend Magic the Gathering.
Okay.
That in and of itself obviously is already a highlight because, you know, we're hanging out with friends, we're playing Magic, already the makings of a good weekend.
Yeah.
But I had a really exciting kind of opportunity, which is Andrew, one of his friends, Andrew, brought a cube with him.
Ooh.
Like a Magic the Gathering draft cube, which was my very first time ever drafting a cube. So it was a nice new experience. Not only was it any old cube, but it was in fact one of CubeCon, which is a convention they have going on in Wisconsin here in about a month and a half or so. It was one of the 2 cubes selected as the representative cube that everyone will be drafting at CubeCon. So I kind of got like the sneak preview of it.
That's pretty cool.
And this one came jam-packed with not only all of the OG dual lands, but also the Power 9.
So are you even allowed to talk about the deck that you built without, spoiling the future CubeCon?
Well, I'm gonna. So
Did you get any Power 9?
I did not get any Power 9. It was scooped up well before I did.
Same as real life then, huh?
Yeah, same as real life. However, there was this guy, you may recall, he's been on the show before. So Ken EDH was there, right?
Uh-huh.
And he was drafting directly in front of me, and he did get Black Lotus.
He did get Black Lotus?
He got Black Lotus, and then he did not freak out, but every time I tried to take a photo of him as like a reference point, like I pull my camera out, so I was like, oh, I'm going to get a picture of him holding the Black Lotus. Like, it seems like such a slam dunk moment he would want to document. He kept telling me to put my phone away. No, we're drafting right now. Put your phone away.
It's about living in the moment.
From like a social etiquette standpoint, it made a lot of sense, but from a documentarian standpoint, I was like, I don't know, man, you're going to want to hear these or cherish these memories. So I was probably the only person I feel like that was drafting in Selesnya, which I mostly did because the first pack I grabbed had Craterhoof Behemoth and had, oh geez, I'm blanking on it now, X Green, Finale of Devastation. So I had a Finale of Devastation and a Craterhoof Behemoth.
You had a win
the next
con.
pack I grabbed, exactly, 2 win cons, and then the next pack had like Path to Exile and all this stuff. So I ended up with a green, white, like all the green stuff was just stompy, go nuts, and then with white control thrown in. So I ended up getting, and it was singleton, by the way, so these were only one copy of each floating around. I ended up getting Path to Exile, Swords to Plowshares, Fateful Absence, Nature's Chant, the like Selesnya one that lets you destroy an artifact or enchantment.
Okay.
Like, but I ended up having 10 or 12 just staple removal spells in those 2 colors. Then tack in Avengers Zendikar, Craterhoof, the Finale Devastation. I just went ham with this deck.
I'm expecting with this interaction package, the set win cons, that you had to have pulled a W. Isn't that right?
I did. Out of, I want to say maybe about 10 matches, I probably pulled like 4 Ws. So I did not just go ham, but I did hold my own.
4 out of 10 is pretty good compared to the expected 25% win rate. You're over 25%. You're almost double. I'd say you ran away with the games.
I will say, not only was there something very surreal about like drafting a Bayou or and those kind of things. So I actually drafted a Savannah, which is the Selesnya dual land. Like drafting an alpha Savannah, Cole, the alpha Savannah, and going, this thing is in my hands probably what, $1,000?
An Alpha Savannah. Let's find out. I gotta ask: was this proxy or was this real?
No, these
in
were
the
real.
skin? Oh wow!
They were real in the skin. The only thing I guess you could argue is not real in the skin is some of the Power 9 were like international editions, so they weren't necessarily like alpha beta, but they were international printings. But still, an international printing of a Black Lotus is still, several $1,000s.
Yeah, it seems like for an Alpha Savannah, you're dropping about 2,900 euros, almost 3,000 euros for that, and that's based on
Yeah,
their
which is
more listed
like
on
$5,000 or so.
Yeah, well, here I'll fact check you on that.
Oh, I'm right, Cole. You bet your bottom dollar.
Let's see. 1 euro is 1.09 USD. So I have a feeling.
Never mind.
Yeah. I
Never
think
mind.
it's
It's
about
eBay.
3,200 bucks, folks.
It's still a lot of money, but I would say all told, in my hand, I probably had $80,000 to $90,000 worth of cardboard stacked in front of me. A collection of cards is expensive when they start talking about the level of insurance policy they have in case something were to happen to it.
Yeah, that it does sound like a keeping your money under your mattress situation, but as long as you're careful about it and not just handing it away to random strangers at a party where you might lose track of them, then you're probably fine.
Yeah. Not to disparage the judgment of the guy who was at a party handing them to random strangers.
Oh, was that what was happening? My bad. Well, no, I'm just kidding. Everybody, it's all good people, so there's no concern there. But if you, like you said, $80,000 to $90,000, you got to be pretty careful lugging around that much cardboard.
I definitely felt like going into it, it was one of those, movie scenes where they're going into like a contaminated area. So they've got to go through like the decontamination process. They step in, they get gassed, they slip into like the full body hazmat suit. That's what I kind of felt like I needed before I touched these cards. And they were all triple sleeved, by the way. So it wasn't like I was getting anywhere near the cardboard, but it definitely felt like there should have been like a Brinks truck or an armed guard or something around me to prevent me from the hooliganism that could have happened.
I'd be worried about the metal dice people roll around. There's things that can break through 3 sleeves.
That was my weekend, was handling basically the closest thing to a priceless work of art that we have in the Magic the Gathering community. I also got time twistered 3 times in one game. That may never happen again in my life. How about you? How are you doing? I know we talked about a lot about how I'm doing, but how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Unfortunately, we didn't get too much Magic, and we talked about we're definitely getting a game in this week. We have somebody we're communicating with about coordinating a meetup at a game store, but we did have a good weekend. We went down like a little bit south to a town called Santa Barbara, and we were at the beach. Pretty much the whole weekend. We couldn't find affordable housing for the night, so we actually car camped in a tiny little Kia. And although we got really horrible sleep, we did succeed in making it through the night. Woke up at about like 6:30 and went out to the beach and got to watch the sunrise. It was really beautiful, and we found a frisbee and like in the surf. And at that point, nobody was on the beach. It was littered in the water. So we started chucking it around, and it was like a pretty good frisbee. We had a pretty fun time. So we're definitely I'm not going to say frisbee is a healthy habit, but you're running around, we're chucking that thing and it's going 10 feet over your head. So it's a little bit of exercise there. We had a fun time.
I think that was actually, you're downplaying the role that frisbees play in exercise, because I think if they weren't doing volleyball and Top Gun, it would have been a frisbee scene. It would have been like 10 shirtless guys playing frisbee on the beach instead of volleyball.
10
so
shirtless
I think
guys
it's
playing
really
frisbee golf or playing ultimate frisbee.
that's so I think it's really like a 1A, 1B kind of situation.
Okay.
But the reason why we have gathered today, it is Bloomburrow pre-release weekend. So as this episode is coming out, it is the Friday of the release of the single greatest set that Magic the Gathering has ever dared to release, Cole. That's right, S tier. We talked about it last episode with our mid-year rankings, that I wasn't going to talk about it last episode. But now we're in this episode, S tier.
I'm excited about it. I've been chuffed. I've been chiefed waiting for these cards. It's so many new cards. It's so many fun, fun takes on old creatures. it's a set that everybody has been spoiling cards, and every single card that gets spoiled, the immediate thought is "aw," or that's just a little too cute for me. Like a lot of these legendary creatures have intrigued me a lot more than the most recent sets this year. Overall, if you're an animal lover, and I think it's hard to find people who aren't self-considered animal lovers, you're gonna like this set a lot.
I'm going to set expectations for this episode now. This episode for me, we talked about it kind of across the last few episodes when we talked about the mid-year review, when we had Ashley on a couple episodes ago and we talked about a little bit about creator fatigue. This is the set that really kind of put wind back in my sails for Magic the Gathering in 2024. Don't get me wrong, I liked OTJ, I liked Fallout that we talked about. This is the set that kind of breathed life back into my soul and nourished me a little bit with some of the burnout I've been feeling.
I'm glad that happened for you, because this set would be a real shame to be feeling that fatigue on. For me personally, I kind of just I'm not going to say I ignored the last two releases, but I haven't purchased a pack of Assassin's Creed, which is saying something, because I always purchase a pack of the newest set. So it's kept my my lust for cardboard high, and so I'm excited to squirrel it away. That's a squirrel joke on some of these Commander products and just regular booster packs.
Yeah, so let's talk about it for a little bit. So let's break down this episode. Our goal is going to be kind of talk a little bit about the mechanics, break down some of the precons, break down some of the cards that you should or should not be keeping your eye on, and kind of give our overall thoughts about the set as a whole. So I think where we can kind of kick it off is what is Bloomburrow? So Bloomburrow set on this adorable little plane where everything is a creature. They teased it this time last year, last Gen Cons, when they first kind of revealed it. You've got 10 different kind of guilds, very Ravnica style, that are represented by animals. So we've got like our Boros mice, we've got our Dimir rats, we've got our Selesnya rabbits, we've got Gruul raccoons, and so forth and so on. So you've got 10 different animal groups that are representing essentially like a Ravnica guild, so to speak, and they all have their own flavor and stuff like that. And also, we have Persona Planeswalkers, because everybody that visits Bloomburrow becomes an animal even if you didn't enter as an animal. So we've got Ral as an otter, and then we've got a couple other like special guest what-if appearances that aren't actually a part of the story.
Timio is a rabbit.
Timio's the rabbit.
Elspeth,
Jace is
mouse form.
Jace the fox. All those kind of things. They even did a secret lair. I don't know if you saw that is going to be adding a couple extra ones that they don't have in the main set.
Okay, I haven't seen that yet.
So I believe, and I'm going to butcher a couple of these, but I believe they showed Vraska as a snake.
Oh,
showed like three or four.
Okay,
there is a badger version of Garruk that looked pretty good, but they're all like pre-existing planeswalkers. There's no like new planeswalker card other than the Ral Otter. Everything else is just sort of a reprint with fresh art. So setting and flavor wise, Cole, what are your takes on this?
I'm a bug guy. There's not too many bugs in this set, but being a bug guy, you can tell I like critters. This is a critter heavy set. It's unique. I remember when Jace having a fursona was kind of like first being joked about in the etherweb, feeling like what has Magic come to. But as it's built up, I have just really dove in, and I like this plane. I think it's fun, it's unique, it has a ton of new cards and a lot of like very cute, not overly powerful cards as well. So I think that the setting is perfect. Call me a Bloomburrownian, but I stand by that this is definitely going to be the most anticipated set of the year. It's going to be hard to beat this follow up with Duskmourn.
100%. I mean, I don't think I'm going to get more of a Bloomburrow stand than I currently am. I think this is one of those sets where they nailed it, right? Like the art directions killed it. Everything is a cute little animal, and even the villains. So the villains in the set are what they call the Calamity Beasts, which are things like there's a big cat, there's an owl, there's like creatures that are on the predator side of things, and even those aren't necessarily uncute. Like they're not, they're threatening in the sense that if a cat is out there hunting a bunch of mice, yes, it's threatening, but they're not in the same realm as like a Phyrexian or an Eldrazi or whatever the main villain from Duskmourn ended up being, where they're like horror settings. So
I mean, admittedly,
I think,
Eluge, the shoreless sea, is like a
Mhm.
terrifying monster. That is not a cute
Oh yeah, that's
creature.
true. It's supposed to be like a sea serpent or a kraken, essentially.
It's actually neither of those, because serpent and kraken are both creature types, and this is a elemental fish, but it definitely
Mhm.
has like a barracuda vibe to it.
But I would just say from like an art standpoint that even those have like great art, because have you seen the ones that are sort of like, I guess, the hunting guide versions? So they show the
Yes.
main character, but then they show like, oh, and here's its claws and here's its this, and it looks like a field guide.
It's a little bit of natural science illustration on there, yeah.
Yeah, like even those, I'm like 10 out of 10 art direction. Get that they're the villain, they're not as cutesy, but they're on point for what it is, which is a wild animal attacking the villagers of Bloomburrow.
Yeah, I'm kind of also of the belief that animals cannot be evil. So, if these are true animals or beasts of sorts, that they can't have bad intention and that they're acting on instinct. So, I find it a little bit I'm not gonna refer to them as the villains of this set, but
Mhm.
rather the antagonists.
I can agree with that, because if you look at them, a lot of their effects kind of play back on like natural settings, so to
Disaster.
speak. Yeah. So, for example, like Yigra, which is the panther, it's obviously a predator, which is why its effect makes everything food. So you go, oh, it's all food to it because it's a predator. When we look at the fish that turns things into islands, it's like, oh yeah, because it's bringing like a little mini tsunami with it. So of course it's flooding the board and putting flood counters on different lands and turning them to islands and that kind of thing. Like it all makes sense in a way that what the creature is ties back into its natural kind of symbiosis with nature in our world.
Yeah, I mean, reading a description here, it says that they wreak disaster on unprecedented scale while they move through the landscape, but they're essentially living seasons, and they're every bit as much of part of the nature as the animal. And so the seasons being like brought on by the appearance of the beasts, like they're more, they are a force of nature for sure.
Well, and it's funny if you think about it. So if these creatures, let's say the inhabitants of Bloomburrow, the mice and the rabbits and stuff like that, if they're to scale to actual mice and rabbits, that really puts it into perspective when you look at like the mono red lynx, that's the cat. Yeah, like, okay, this big terror is really the size of a small feline.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, and for instance, like the snake as well is something that in the art looks. I mean, the blight snake that is
Mhm.
absolutely insane. By the way,
Oh, for
the
sure.
torment of hailfire on it, but it causes like all the everything that's living to decay around it, and so even if it is moving through a couple of houses in its art, and so you get to see kind of the scale.
For me, this is one of those things where I think like setting flavor wise is 10 out of 10. Like I think they just really hammered the way the art works. This is one of those sets where I do really, really enjoy the alternate frames, because for me, some of the sets are very hit or miss if I'm going to enjoy like the alternate art and the framing. The fact that they went like, here's cutesy, and then my alternate art is like anime and cutesy, I think was a great direction.
I can go kind of either way on the anime as the additional like art. I think it's fun, but what started out as kind of like a surprising gimmick that was like, ooh, oh, it was cool. It was very rare. It's like now it kind of feels like it's becoming their crutch. Like fall back on that as a alternate art style, and I don't know. While I do like a lot of the anime printing, so I'm not complaining. I'm just observing. Just observing.
Now, the one thing I don't like about the anime printings is something they're doing in this set, which is a lot of them are like etched foil only.
Uh-huh.
So I'm more of a fan of like the non-etched, non-foil. Like, give me that art look, but give it to me in a flat card, not necessarily in the Pringle that is going to be my etched foil. So I wish that they had that as a alternate, like regular printing of this art, but it seems to be that they only have the etched version.
Yeah, I mean, foiling pringling. None of it matters when you stick it in a Ultra Pro 100 100 cards. Double sleeve it, and it will be so stuffed
Wait.
against the wall that it has no opportunity to ever pringle. But I do also want to mention, like you said, the cutesy arts I think are really really cool. I love the way that like all the cards essentially connect together, and it looks like a big like storybook almost. And the art is just like fantastic. Like I'm a little bit more of a, like, coming from fantasy, like old novels and like the Wizard of Earthsea and that sort of thing. It's like a lot of this art kind of appeals to it's like it looks very different than art that usually gets accepted in Magic. It's gorgeous, and I mean it evokes happiness. All these cards, like looking through them on Scryfall, are just like stunning. It'd be tough to decide, if I am going to build a couple of these legendary creatures, which version I'm going to buy.
Yeah, and it's funny. So you said, I think, which is the key here, if you were to build a couple of these, right? Now, I understand what you're saying, which is, there's a handful of them that have arts that you would be remiss in not looking at all of them and deciding like a good, perfect art for you. But I'm looking at it in almost the sense that, like, when you say a couple, I mean, I literally might build a couple of these. Because what I tend to do when a new set comes out is I'll sit on Moxfield, and as I see new commanders, I'll throw them on a list. Like, oh, okay, this one looks cool. Let me throw it on this list. This one looks cool. Let me throw it on the list. And then I reflect back and I narrow that list down from, whatever. Like, okay, I found 5 to 10 of them. I'm going to narrow it down to like the 1, 2, maybe 3 that I really enjoy. I have 27 commanders on my Moxfield list right now that I haven't narrowed down yet, but I'm like, they all look so good. They all have great art. They all do something cool that I'm interested in. But I can't justify 27 Bloomburrow decks. Not right now.
I was going to say, how many of those are from Bloomburrow?
All of them, actually, because I did not include things like Chatterfang or anything like that. Those are all 27 just from Bloomburrow.
Wow.
I have another list that will knock your socks off. That's like 75 random commanders from other sets.
Yeah, I have a decent little list, but I go through and I move things into a back burner, if I'm not really feeling like building it, or the back burner if I'm really not feeling like building it. And so I do have about like 4 to 5 of these, legendary creatures that are coming out that I'm like, I could really see, justifying that.
Yeah, I kind of do the same thing, which is, so my Moxfield sorting is sort of like, what am I interested in? Okay, this is the back burner of like, I'm still interested in this commander, but it's not like a tier 1 must build for me. Okay, and then here's ones that look cool, but are probably going to fall off at some point if something better comes along. So I kind of have the same thing in my sorting system. I also have the same thing in the decks I currently have. So decks that I currently have built, I have like, oh, here's a precon I want to upgrade. Here's a precon I want to tear apart. Here's a precon I'm going to leave as is. Stuff like that. But with this, I legit have 27 of them, and I look at, let's just say, Mabel, and I go, oh, you know what? Boros mice, little equipment, a little kind of like targeting sub theme. This could be a fun deck. And then I go, but prowess otters look fun. And then as I'm looking over there, I go, you know what? Group hug bunnies. Like, it's like, if I were to line all of them up, it's like one of those things where I look left to right, each one in the list gets progressively better. And then if I were to take the same list and look right to left, each one in the list gets progressively better. Like, I just can't decide which direction looks more desirable right now.
So how do you ever decide? Do you end up throwing a dart at the wall, and that's what decides it for you? Or?
So this has been my problem in previous sets, is I'll have like a handful, like I said, and typically not this many. It'll be like 2 to 3 or something at the end. And then I end up not building any of them, because then the next set is like choking me down the pipeline, right? Like, it's just, okay, I'm ready to build Sophie, dogged detective. Oh, wait, here comes the next thing. Forget about Sophie. This is the one, because I feel like I didn't do anything with Assassin's Creed. I didn't buy any Assassin's Creed. I bought a little bit of Modern Horizons 3, but not too much. Like, I got 2 of the precons, one for me, one for Sharon.
Yeah.
And we got a small, like, I want to say 2 or 3 packs total. So we didn't invest too heavily in that. I don't foresee myself investing too heavily in Duskmorn, so I feel like I can sit here for a while. Like, I feel like I can legitimately sit here into 2025 and be happy if I just went, I'm going to be here, I'm going to generate some decks, and really just sit in this plane, enjoy this plane,
Uh-huh.
spread out a little bit. So I think this might actually be the one where I tear down some precons I'm not using and I reinvest and go, okay, I don't necessarily want Chishiro, the Gruul modified creature precon. It's good, but it's not as exciting as the idea of Trash Panda's the Gruul precon.
Uh-huh.
I think that's kind of where I'm at with this set. Like, I'm so enamored with it so far that I can just find myself like settling in. Like, I'm ready to move into Bloomburrow, put down roots, and just live in here for a little bit.
And it's got such a diverse, like, set of cards in it that you can really do that too. It's like you could I'm jealous for somebody whose first set is Bloomburrow. Like that would be
Mhm.
a very fun, set to have those kind of emotions tied together, like feeling like, this is your intro to Magic. Even the basic lands just are so fun and interesting, and I'd be like, oh, how is every set not like this? How is every set not in this world?
Speaking of like flavor wins, let's talk about the mechanics really quick because I think what they've done here, and we talked about this again in like our mid-year commander episode, is not every set I think is been well honed on mechanics this year
Uh-huh.
as far as like tying the mechanic into the sets. I think some have done better than others. But I think here we kind of hit this point where when I look at these mechanics, they all make perfect sense. We've got Offspring, which is play a creature. I think you pay 2 generic, and then you make like a 1/1 version copy of that creature. Like
Uh-huh.
that makes perfect sense to me. I bring in a creature, it like drops out a little baby. If you look at those Offspring tokens for the ones that they've made, they all look adorable because it's like big possum and baby possum and stuff like that. I think they really crushed it on the mechanics this time around.
Yeah. So okay, I really like Offspring, but then the further you go into the, like Valiant, being just a little
Mhm.
different run on Heroic, which is an older mechanic, is
Sure.
fine because it only happens once each turn, which I think, I think Nadu could really appreciate that change on Heroic. But Forage, being like exiling 3 cards or sacrificing a food, is pretty cool as well. I'm loving the increased interaction with food tokens, and this also gives you the opportunity to use a lot of these forage cards without having to invest too much into foods if that's not your thing.
Well, and I think too, when you look at the creatures they gave these to, it makes a lot of sense. Like Offspring pops up on a couple different creatures, but it's kind of like the primary piece to the bird commanders. And we'll get into it in the precon, but one of the precons that has the bird on it is an Offspring deck. So it kind of makes sense there. When you look at Forage, that's kind of leaning in towards the squirrels. And talking about Forage, I think it's a great mechanic. We talked a little bit. I keep bringing up the last episode because we did touch on this, even though we said we weren't going to, or at least I touched on it. I won't drag you into my guilt. I think this is what collect evidence could have been. It could have been forage, but with a clue instead of food. Forage here could also be, if you think about it, it's kind of like an escape mechanic, right? In the sense of like, okay, how do you escape something from the graveyard? Well, you go and you exile so many other cards, and it comes back up. Like it ties so well into other mechanics we've seen that it feels like kind of the next evolution on it, where okay, I can either delve, so to speak, or I can
Right.
crank this thematically related, piece of item on my board.
Yeah, and so I can imagine a world where they eventually do that for blood tokens as well.
Mhm.
But I do think that was a pretty epic fail. But also similarly, a new, the expend mechanic, which is just kind of like putting a word on something that we've always done, which they did with Outlaws of Thunder Junction and committing a crime, which is like, rather
Sure.
than making something up or creating an entirely different mechanic, it's like, let's just slap a name on a basic action. And so I expend, which if you don't know is just like essentially counting up the mana that you're using on your turn. So like after you expend 4 by using 4 mana to like cast spells or abilities. No, I think it's just spells. But it's easy to learn if you're a newer player, and it's a useful terminology that you don't have to, you know, think too much about. It's like easy to add into your lexicon.
Hmm. I think the only thing with expend though, and I've heard a couple people bring this up in the negative light, which to me, I don't mind the mechanic. Obviously, it depends on what you're gaining from expending.
Uh-huh.
I think a couple of them are like you gain life and stuff like that.
No,
I've
no,
heard
no.
a couple.
There's way cooler ones. There's like a raccoon
There's
who, whenever you expend 8, you exile the top 2 cards of your library. It's not all just gaining life. There's some cool stuff.
Sure, sure. But I mean, there are other effects. But what I'm getting at is I've heard a couple people make the complaint that why are we rewarding people for doing game actions you were already going to make? Like, because when you
Because you
expend
spent
those four.
you spent mana to cast the spell to get the payoff for it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's like, okay, you expend 4, right? So your payoff for spending 4 mana is the spells that you got to cast with that mana. So I have heard the argument of like, well, why am I giving an additional bonus for casting a spell that
That
I
is
want to
all
cast
Magic the
anyway?
Gathering is. It's like if you cast like Zuladoc, the Void Gorger, that gives your CMC spells 6 or greater cascade. It's like, oh well, why
Mhm.
give people an additional reward for spending 6 mana? It's like that's a foolish argument because that's literally you're playing a card to get the benefit of casting that or spending that much mana. It's
Mhm.
not like you're just tapping the
I'm
mana
not.
and floating it. You have to actually spend it. And I'm not directing this at you. I'm just hyped
No,
up.
but I
I'm just
understand what
hyped up.
you're saying. I completely understand what you're saying, and I do actually. I really like the cards that this is on. So we talked about like the offspring mechanic being a core portion of that bird precon that we'll get into the Family
Yeah.
Matters precon. Well, expand is kind of the same thing for the raccoons. Because the face commander of the raccoon precon, or well, not the face commander, but one of the other raccoon commanders has to do with the expend mechanic. So, like you were saying, it's expend 4, you gain life, expend 8, and you get to exile the top 2 cards of your library.
Right.
And then on top of that, it turns all your raccoons into like pseudo mana dorks. Like you don't have to tap them for mana, but it gives you a bulk, kind of like carpet of flowers type effect for gruel mana.
A real black market type beat.
I think it's actually a really cool, versatile card because if you look at that card being the face commander of the expend mechanic for this set, it does exactly what you'd want it to do, right? Like it doesn't tell you what deck you have to build because it doesn't tell me what I have to spend the 4 or 8 mana on. It just tells me spend 4 or 8 mana each turn, and it encourages you to put other raccoons in it so you can gain mana to then spend.
Uh-huh.
But I think it does exactly what you want it to do. And I do agree with you when you say, like, if I were to go spend mana for Zuladoc and then Zuladoc comes with his own line of text, or if I I spend mana for a Panharmonicon just so that Panharmonicon they can then double up all my ETBs. Well,
Right.
that's, like that's the whole point of spending the mana is so that I can get that long term effect of it.
We have a little bit of a Bloomburrow situation in here. There's a cat living on the farm with us, and we've let him inside,
Hmm.
and he is just raking his claws. He's just purring, but he is just slicing and dicing as he purrs. He's cute, but
Into you or
no, and Erica is behind me, but it's a real first strike 3-1 at the moment. Uh,
it's first strike. It's not first strike death touch though, right? It's just solo first strike.
no, it's appearing to be first strike death touch. She's also allergic,
Okay.
but yeah, I mean, to go back to the main topic, I mean, I think expending is cool. I think cat having to being forced to play raccoons makes up for the any strength that the card necessarily has, just because I don't think there's a vast amount of raccoons other than what's been printed in Bloomburrow. So best of luck on that one. I do think that's a cool card, but I think you're going to be having to pay a lot more than 8 mana to get the value out of that expend. I do think that there's one more really like super interesting mechanic. I mean, there's a couple, but one that like I think is going to stick around and be in other sets, and that's gift.
Yeah, I think as like a political player myself, I actually really like the gifting mechanic.
Understatement of
Uh,
the century, the most political player of all time.
yeah, yeah. But I actually do really like it. And I like the fact that the gifts, one, they're not super overwhelming, right? Like most of the gifts you see on the cards are things like let someone draw a card or give them a 1/1
Yeah,
fish.
I don't know. There's
Or
one that's pretty overwhelming, I would say.
yeah, but as like a whole, there's nothing that's or there's not many, I should say, that feel like are just terrible trade-offs. Plus, there's the fact that the person you promise the gift to does not necessarily have to be the person you target. For example, there's a couple of removal spells that are, where you promise a card, and then if you don't promise the gift, basically you bounce their creature till end of turn, then it returns with a 1/1 counter. If you do promise the gift, it gets exiled. So there are
Right.
a couple like that where you go, listen, it's not a bad trade off. And if I promise player three the opportunity to draw a card and we can agree that we're exiling a threat, and maybe I can use that card draw to like bandy some goodwill. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. I think it's a quality mechanic. I think it does have some interesting gameplay ramifications going forward.
Yeah, and well, and I think it's also worth stating that a lot of these, like even the small effects of gifting a card and giving card draw to somebody, I mean, are pretty powerful. Like it is a downside on a lot of cards. So I don't think, there's like 39, almost 40 cards that, or that might be not true. I'm actually on here on on Scryfall searched for gift, sorted release date down. So it's much less. Up to, but probably closer to about 20 gifting
Sure.
cards. I don't think like a large majority of them will become popular. Like the ones that say gift a card have to have a pretty powerful effect. And then like some of them like perch protection, which gift an extra turn. That seems like kind of a dangerous card to because it basically Teferis protections you with 4/2/2 blue bird tokens with flying, and then it gives an opponent an extra turn. You can kind of get into some scenarios where you're like, okay, well I'll gift you an extra turn. You use your turn to kill the other two players, and then when I come back, we'll just 1v1. I think it's like I'm interested in seeing how that one plays out, but I mean, otherwise, a tapped fish
Yeah,
is
I
not a
think
big deal.
no, I think I agree with you on the perch protection because I think the ideal scenario to that is a player can't refuse your gift, as far as I'm aware. So if there was some scenario where a player could take out two of you, right? Let's say you're down to the final three and it's me, you, and Erica. Erica can take out the two of us. And I go, okay, well, I'm going to cast this. I'm going to gift Erica an extra turn, but I'm going to Fairy's Protection out.
Right.
And she uses that turn to take you out. And then I know, okay, 1v1, maybe she can't handle the crackback that I can give now that her creatures are tapped, stuff like that. So if there's some outside chance that then I could come in and the four birds I make can somehow block enough to get me to the next turn that is my turn, maybe there's some like outside the box kind of win con there, but I don't know that it's going to be consistent enough to really go, this outweighs Teferi's protection.
Well, it also costs 6 mana versus 3 manas of fairy, protection. So I don't think that
Right.
it's like that. I don't think. Oh, and it also has the word protection in it. So it's like it's definitely if you're on a perch, you're cut above, but seems to be like a cut below fairy's protection. There is one other pretty funny little gift card. Okay, but then there is a world where you kill somebody while they have no cards in their library because you gift them a card and they can't refuse that. And so I do like that. But the other cool card is Octomancer, which gifts an octopus for 5 mana. But at the
Mhm.
beginning of each end step, you make a token that's a copy of a target creature that ETB'd this turn. So you gift an 8/8 blue octopus creature token. That's pretty bulky. I'm liking that one. I'd love to um, do some octopus shenanigans and
You'd
win
love
by
to start gifting out
creating an army.
octopi.
Yeah, because then you get to copy that same octopus that you gifted on your end step.
Mhm.
So you're basically paying 5 mana for like you know, bring
Well,
the ocean out.
I know it's not like synergistically great, but this would be the kind of card you'd want to run it like like Brenolin, the one that cares about octopus and sea serpents and all that stuff, just so you can like, well, now I've got another octopus to put in here.
Yeah, it's well, and it itself is not an octopus. It's just an octopus. It's a frog druid, but it makes an octopus
Right.
on. So it might be worth it, but otherwise, still a pretty strong card.
Yeah, fair enough. Now, the next thing we like to talk about on here is usually precons. So I am curious. We've got 4 precons this time around. I'm on the high horse here.
Uh huh.
Admittedly, there are 3 of the precons that I absolutely adore, and then there's a 4th precon which I will go on record and say is probably on paper the most powerful or the most easily to upgrade into a high power deck, and that's the one I care the least about.
It's the squirrels one.
But
Is that a
it
spoiler
is the
alert?
squirrels one.
It has to be, right? Yeah.
Is the squirrels one absolutely right? Like it's the one that has the most potential to upgrade into something like degenerate and busted with infinite combos.
Yeah,
And
let's rip this band-aid
making
off first. You just stick a Chatterfang in here or at the top of this and
well,
huh.
and there's the kicker. There is a Chatterfang already in the deck.
Wow, what a day it is that Chatterfang is being printed in a precon and Academy Manufactor. Wow. And Gilded Goose. This is just stacked.
Yeah, trust me, like you're not making a token, you're making a lot of tokens. And what's weird is like they already have with the Yigra, the Calamity Beast that has everything as food.
The eater
There's
of
so
all.
many infinite combos that already exist because of the fact that all these tokens are food. It can eat it to make a bunch of life. And then there's the other squirrel that helps you like recur them from the graveyard. So there's already like a bunch of infinite combos and loops and stuff you can do with this deck. But for whatever reason, it just doesn't appeal to me in the same way that the other 3 appeal to me. The other 3 just have more of like a goofiness to them that I love.
Yeah, I mean it's a green black squirrel deck. It's got great reprints. You're gonna be fine buying this deck, and I think it'd be probably a great deck for like a beginner to kind of get their hand at aristocrats, and it's definitely upgradable like you mentioned. But what's your favorite of the 3 other decks then?
This is the way I kind of have them ranked. I'm kind of curious to see how your list stacks up. Now, I will preface this by saying that I'm probably going to get all 4 of them. And I don't say that as like some kind of weird flex or anything. It literally just goes back to the fact that I love this set so much that I want to get all 4 of them and actually turn all 4 of them into like forever decks potentially.
Wow.
But for me, the squirrels kind of bring out 4th. Then I would almost say the raccoons, because I like the raccoon. So the head raccoon on the face commander here is not the expend one we were talking about.
Right.
It's one that basically turns all artifacts or enchantments that have a greater mana value than 4. It turns them into creatures
On your turn
can attack
only.
and stuff. Yeah, on your turn only. So the idea is, you got a bunch of quote unquote junk because it's sort of the junk deck, and you turn those things into creatures, and then
And they have
you
indestructible.
go smash people. Yeah, they have indestructible, so you go smash people with
And
them.
they draw you cards when they deal damage to players. So
also, the backup commander on there is a little interesting. It's also another Calamity Beast. This one has to do with whenever you cast an enchantment spell, it has Cascade.
right.
So that
you cast from your
could be
hand. It's not
interesting.
whenever you cast an enchantment spell. You have to cast them from your
whenever
hand.
you cast it.
No,
So
not true.
As I please, I
We
get
have a
Cascade.
duty to the people to speak the truth.
Yes, you do have to cast it from your hand, but I don't know. That one feels a little gimmicky. Like you'd have to build a specific deck for it. Like Cascade's good, but I think you'd have to have a very specific desire to have a Gruul Cascade Enchantress deck.
Don't underestimate it. I think, yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's an enchantress deck that, you cascade into more enchantments. And then, you're playing enchantress. So when those enchantments ETB, you're drawing cards off of it. And then you're able to play more enchantments. It just seems like rather than being like a Voltron style enchantress deck that wants to buff somebody up, I think you should probably be playing this as like a enchantment synergy or enchantment combo deck that seeks to draw cards and just fuel the cascade machine.
Yeah, but so for me, the Gruul raccoons probably about third, because whereas the squirrels were very focused on what they want to do, this one's kind of like the opposite. Like you could go all artifact synergy, all enchantment synergy, or somewhere in between. Number two is gonna in one. No, I will say it's really more of like a 1A 1B situation more than a 1 and 2. But I 2 would have to be the Offspring deck. Because first, I really like it. Jeskai is a great color combination if you do decide to go into the bird synergy. There's a lot of birds in Azorius. There's a lot of birds in Jeskai. But the Offspring mechanic does feel like something that you could grow and build this deck into and turn it into something that's really degenerate if you really wanted to. And then tops for me is the group hug bunnies.
Yeah, Bumbleflower and co. Yeah, we have pretty similar lists there. I also like. I mean, you took the words out of my mouth with the raccoons. I really love the commander on that. I love the art too. I think it's just a fun card. I would love to build that as a deck, but I'm not too interested in the precon. I think there's a lot of like small synergies that are being like spread on the EDH rack and stuff that do not work with Bellow, that are just like it's a deck that I think it's going to confuse a lot of newer players, just because they might try to upgrade it with cards that do not work for the theme, but I do really like it. I mean, Zinnia, the Valley's Voice. There's the idea of like family matters was like pretty funny because that was revealed right during the Drake and Kendrick dispute, and so that felt like a little bit of added fuel to the fire. But the fact, like like you mentioned, you can do some pretty degenerate stuff by getting copies of creatures that you shouldn't normally have copies of, and I guarantee you there's going to be like a lot of ways to abuse this. I really like the alternative commander that it feels like a more casual version of Winota and Arthur the Marigold Knight, who is super cute and just like I would run it for the art alone. And then, like you said, number one is going to be the Miss Bumbleflower, which just seems like a generally pretty fun deck to play. I like the idea of helping others and getting more advantage of it. And I'm sure those +1/+1 counters, stack up. We've all seen Brina get pretty strong while disguised as group hug / politics. But the alternative commander on that as well, the Mr. Foxglove, seems like a super fun card. Whenever you attack, you draw cards equal to the number of cards in the defending player's hand minus the cards in your hand. So if they have more cards than you, and if they have more cards in their hand than you draw. If they don't, then you get to put a creature from your hand onto the battlefield. So it's kind of like, it's not tapped and attacking. So I don't think you're going to get any like feels bad Blightsteel Colossuses out of this, but it just seems like a fun alternative to the face there.
Well, and I think it really succeeds on like the Miss Bumbleflower deck really succeeds on the flavor standpoint of it too, because if we look at Miss Bumbleflower herself, the first time the ability activates, you put a 1/1 counter on something and opponent draws a card, but that 1/1 countered creature also gains flying until end of turn.
Which is interesting,
and
yeah.
So, and here's what I want you to think about. The reason behind that is because it's around rabbits, right? And rabbits do what? They hop up in the air. So it's not necessarily that they're flying so much as flying is a way to say like, look, the bunny jumped way up in the air.
That's pretty cute. I didn't really think about it like that, and I appreciate that that thought. It
Hmm.
is like it's not really flying. Then it's bounding or
Yeah,
jumping.
yeah. It's like bounce basically.
They might that I could see them like in the future or an alternate reality where they did like jump as a keyword where it's like you can attack as though you have flying, but you cannot block as though you had flying. Or something like that. Like you only, or it's like
Yeah, I
phasing, but
could
with
see.
flying, phasing, flying. I don't know. We'll think
I
there's
could see
something there.
something like that. Make it like leap or something. They give it to like monks.
Yeah.
They go, oh look, some kind of like Shaolin warrior style ability.
Uh huh.
But yeah, for me, all four precons I think are wins. Usually, when we look at precons, I tend to feel like there's one standout, two to three that I could be comfortable buying, and then one that's like the obvious not for me or stinker. This one, I said the squirrels is probably not for me, but I think the squirrels, from a power standpoint, could objectively be the strongest deck. So it's one of those like it's not for me flavor wise, but you want to get like a really awesome deck that you can do a lot of stuff with. It could be the deck for you.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to make a mistake buying any of these.
Yeah.
Maybe spreading out from the commander content and getting into a commander in a different context. Are there any non-precon, commanders that you were really drawn to out of some of the legendaries?
Yeah, there actually was quite a few. So the otters I really like. So you got like Bria, which gives all your other otters prowess. But there's also Alania, which I'm kind of really drawn to. So Alania is a spell slinger commander. So instead of going for the prowess sub theme or the prowess theme that the otters have,
Uh huh.
this one is the first instant sorcery or other otter that you cast. You can let an opponent draw a card, and if you do, you can copy a spell. So it's
Okay.
like a spell copy kind of deck. And it gives you like that otter synergy, so you're probably still building the prowess otter deck.
Of your dreams,
So I
right?
really, yeah, of your dreams. So I really like that. I also like Wick. I don't know if you saw Wick, the Grixis rat that makes like a snail,
Oh yeah, yeah, okay. You mean
because that
yeah,
one,
the world mind, that guy that seems
yes.
super interesting. I really like that as a rat lead.
Well, and that's why. So it's like a rat deck, the traditional rat deck you can think of, but also with the snail it makes. So the snail essentially is like when it gets destroyed, it deals damage equal to its power, and it gains power as rat center. So it's almost like a jury master of the review style commander tacked onto a rat commander. So you're getting kind of like the best of both worlds
And it
in a
draws you
great color
cards.
pairing.
You draw cards equal to the power, and
Hmm.
it deals it to each opponent. So it's a win con if you're able to generate enough rats, and that's one thing that the rat deck can do.
Yeah, the one thing the rat deck can do is generate a ton of rats. And the other reason, and I think this is kind of like an understated reason for it being a great rat commander. So in Bloomburrow, the rats are Demir. So you got blue, black rats. Traditionally, rats have been black. That's their kind of go-to color. But if we go back to Eldraine, Wilds of Eldraine, rats were in Rakdos colors. So you saw a lot of red rats, black rats. So with it being in Grixis, you get essentially every rat that's been printed. You get access to them regardless of what plane they're on.
Yeah, it definitely is going to rat evolutionize the. I have a rat commander deck that I honestly has been collecting a lot of dust. It was fun. It was novel. It's a relentless rats deck. Not to mention that they did print the like Ren or whatever, the guy who cares about rats on each instep. You make X 1/1 black rats that are basically relentless rats because they get +1/+1 for each other rat you control. So they're better relentless rat tokens.
Mhm.
And it also is graveyard hate, and it also is a ward too. It's like that just seems objectively pretty strong, but the graveyard hate aspect of it just kind of takes me out. Whereas Wick, the world mind, draws you cards, gives you Grixis, so you have access to two full more colors, and it just seems like it generally less feels bad for the opponents.
Yeah, for sure.
or
What about
relentless
you?
rat
Is there
players.
any non-precon commanders that you're, I guess, chomping at the bit to look at?
No, I was only really interested in the raccoon. No, I'm just kidding around. There were several. At first I was really in love with Flubs the Fool. You play an additional land on each of your turns, but whenever you play a land or cast a spell, you draw a card. If only if you are hellbent, meaning you have no cards in hand. Otherwise, you discard. It just it's a cute art. There's a little bug in there. It has a cute flavor text, but realistically, I imagine myself building one of these two different calamity beasts. I really like Eluge, the Shoreless Sea. I prefer the regular art to it than the monster manual one, but they're both really
Mhm.
beautiful. But that one, his power and toughness are equal to the number of islands you control. He costs 3 blue and 1 colorless. And then whenever he ETBs, which this set has changed ETBs to just enters, and that's something we need to address. But when it enters or attacks, you put a flood counter on target land, and it becomes an island in addition to its other types for as long as it has that counter. And your first instant or sorcery spell you cast each turn costs blue or colorless less to cast for each land you control with a flood counter on it. So pretty quickly, if you have any sort of like other flood counter generation, of which there are, a couple cards, there's like a Doctor Who card, the Invasion of Mars, and then there's like obviously Quicksilver Fountain if you're, a little bit of a more old school. But it just seems like a fun way to like a deck that's focused on giving yourself flash and casting big sorceries for free on opponents' turns. It's not going to be super fun for my opponents, but it's going to be super fun for me. That's probably what I'm going to end up building. But I also did like
Mhm.
Maha, Its Feathers Knight. Not only is it like a poetic name, the art is beautiful, but the effect of giving your opponent's creatures all base toughness 1 is pretty dirty. And Ward discard a card that's right up my alley. I love making people discard and flample. Anybody? So
Mhm.
that's where I'm kind of at right now.
Yeah, and that one also comes with like a lot of interesting tech too, because that's the one where if you have Kervik, regular Kervik, with it's like all creatures get -1/-1. There's so many effects out there that just
Deal 1
reduce
damage
toughness
to
by
each
1.
creature,
Yeah.
or like
Deal
pestilence.
1
Yeah,
damage to each creature.
you're
So
going to
there's
be
so many of those
emptying
effects.
boards.
Yeah, this is the one where it's like, I'm not saying that it's on the same scale, but if there was one that was going to enter like the saltiest commanders list, this is the one I think has the most potential is Maha.
Yeah, well,
Like,
I hope I build it before then, and then by the time it becomes salty, my investment is completely wasted, as I am never able to play it again.
yeah, so I think last thing we want to talk about here is any additional cards that you think, is there any standouts otherwise in the set that you think might show a lasting impact? And I've got one, I think, key thought on it.
Yeah, I mean, I have. Well, here I'll one up you. I got 2. I mean,
Okay.
there are a ton of cards in here that I think are going to see a lot of use. But the one that stands out, like pretty much the most to me, is going to be the Dark Confidant upgrade, potentially upgrade.
Mhm.
It costs 3 versus Dark Confidants 2, but it's Dark Star Augur. It's a Bat Warlock, and it has Offspring 1 black, and it's flying. And at the beginning of your upkeep, it Dark Confidant. So it reveals the top card of your library, puts that card into your hand, and you lose life equal to its mana value. So if you pay the offspring cost, you get 2 of these little buggers for 4 mana versus, Dark Confidant's 2 for 2. Or, one, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Um, but this is just a really powerful effect because if you are able to reveal like low CMC cards, like if your deck has a lot of lifelink or if it's low to the ground, you're going to be able to just get so much card advantage. And if you're getting lands, you don't take any damage. So I've always been a huge Dark Confidant fan. This Dark Star Augur, I'm probably going to buy, a couple copies of because it's good, the art's good, it's a strong card. The other card that I really like. Oh
Speaking
yeah, what you got?
No, I was gonna say, speaking on that same thread, there is a lizard one that I really like too.
Okay.
That is a red lizard with offspring that is impact trimmers. So you can actually have a second one enter, and then you have basically 2 impact trimmers. So whenever
Ooh.
a creature enters the battlefield, deals 1 damage to each opponent.
And for
That
any
one looks good too.
like Torbrand style decks or things that increase damage, that's going to be absolutely brutal.
Yeah, for sure.
The other card that I really like that I think is going to be big for spell slingers is Storm Splitter, which is 3 in a red. It's a hasty otter wizard. He's a 1/4, but whenever you cast an instant or a sorcery spell, you create a token that's a copy of the Storm Splitter, and it gets exiled at the beginning of the next end step. So you're making a ton of these on a storm turn. If you have any sort of like ATB effects, obviously that's going to be pretty strong, but also there's tons of ways to buff up your creatures. And if you can cast infinite spells, you make an infinite army of 1/1s, and it's going to turn even the most innocuous spell into a win con. So there's some tricks here.
I think that's another fun one too, because that's one of those ones that's very easy to overlook. A lot of times people read those cards and they go, okay, so I've got one, and then it's going to make another one, and it's going to make another one, and it's make another one. But that's not really the case. The case is it grows exponentially. So you're going to have 1 make 1, and then those 2 are going to make 2, and then you're going to have 4 make 8. It's going to keep doubling each time, which gives you an insane board state if you can, like you said, you have that storm turn, or you chain together a couple cantrips. Suddenly it gets out of hand very fast.
Like, you best believe this is going into my Gandalf deck, and it's you can't stop me.
Yeah. Now, the only other one I wanted to talk about is the season cycle. I think that's something we should definitely discuss here for a second.
Sure.
So they made a cycle of cards, 1 for each color, and some of them are more useful than others. But I want to talk about it, 1, because of how adorable they are, but also because some of them actually are pretty useful. So on each of them, the blue one, I would even say the black one looks like it could be fun, but each of these things have 3 modes. So you've got little paw prints. So you've got a 1 paw print mode, a 2 paw print mode, and 3 paw print mode. And you can mix and match them however you want, up to a total of 5 paw prints. So you could select the first mode 5 times. You could select the last mode once, and then, the other ones up to 2 paw prints. However you want to do it, as long as your sum is 5. Like you said, the blue one looks ridiculous. The black one with the seasonal loss, I really like, because the 1 paw print mode is every player sacks a creature. So if you were to play this
5 times,
yeah, if you were to play this and you have like an empty board, or you have like a blood artist out, and you just go, here you go, I'm gonna do this 5 times. Like, that could be a degenerate game-winning action, depending on where you're standing life total wise.
Well, not to mention that one also, the 2 paw print ability that draws a card for each creature you control that dies this turn. It refills your hand. You can slap that on there if you're in need. And then the 3 paw print will just straight up win the game if you have enough creatures in your graveyard, where each opponent loses X life equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard.
I just wanted to bring them up because usually modal spells, they're kind of a mixed bag. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. Usually what happens is they're overcosted, like you're paying 6 mana for a confluence or something, and then it's like pick 2 of the 5 modes we've got on here, and they're all kind of like meh for the price, but you go, well, it's got versatility. These ones I think are a little better. Now, not all of them. I think the white one's kind of a dud. The red one's also kind of meh for me. But the other 3, I think, are playable in the right setting.
Yeah, I mean, the blue one is a board wipe, or, it creates 2 token copies of any creature or artifact you control, or draws you up to 5 cards for 6 mana in blue. That's pretty bad. But, the fact that you can board wipe and do a couple of those, other modes, they're pretty versatile. I think it reminds me of the Outlaw of Thunder Junction cards, where you can, basically just pay kicker and get a little bit, more for your maybe bang
Yeah,
for your buck.
the
Like
sprees.
the spree spells, but this gives you that, you get the choice without having to spend more mana, and so a lot of them are generally, I think, overcosted for what they do, but they're cool in their modality.
Now we come to our favorite and probably least effective portion of this, which is our must build selection, Cole. So every time we do one of these previews, we pick a commander that's like, hey, they can't miss. Odds are we're gonna build it ourselves, put it in our deck, our rotation rather. So what commander are you thinking is your most likely to be built and added to your permanent rotation?
Well, it was what I was straight to what I was drawn to earlier. I got to go with the Eluge, the Shoreless Sea. I've been, itching for some mono blue action. I don't want to play degenerate, free counterspell tribal, but every counterspell becomes close to free after a couple turns of Eluge being on the battlefield. But that just seems like a fun deck to me. I like reducing costs. I like getting to do stuff on other people's turn, and the art is just really cool. So expect me to see this until it proves to be too unfun for anybody to play against, and I subsequently dismantle it in about 1 month later.
I do like the fact that a lot of like spell cost reducers and stuff just reduce the generic mana. So the fact that this also can reduce the blue mana seems really good.
Yeah, and I like that they specified that you can also you get the colorless reduced as well. So it's not only blue mana, but it looks like it was almost worded to be you only get the blue mana reduced, which arguably might have been more fair, but we'll just have to wait and find out on that one.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things where it's going to be maybe a little slow to start because you got to enter the battlefield and you got to attack, and you're in mono blue, so you're not getting like a lot of haste effects.
Right.
But I think if you have this thing stick around to like 3-4 turns where suddenly everything below a 4 cost is free, I mean, that at that point that sounds like it would be extremely efficient.
Well, and not to mention, if he gets removed, you get to keep the flood counters. So he every time he comes back, you're starting where you left off, and you always get that reduction. So
Yeah.
what about
Okay.
you?
For me, I went with one of the face commanders of the precons,
Ooh,
Zinnia, Valley's Voice.
ooh. Show
So
me how to
I
lie. You're getting closer. That's offspring.
yeah, I just really like this. I like the fact that it's one, it's a 1/3 flyer, which on its face value is not that crazy, but the fact that it buffs itself up, so you can have anything with a base power 1, basically you're going to get +1/+0 for, and the offsprings are all 1/1s. So
Right.
everything you make offsprings of, suddenly you're buffing up your commander. So this, I feel like, is one of those things that even though it's a 1/3, kind of like, listen, Brina is also a 1/3. And Brina threatens commander damage a lot. Like as far as a commander damage victory, this is one
Yeah.
of those ones where maybe it's a little sneakier because you're not putting permanent counters on there, but you could flood the board with a ton of 1/1s and then just go, okay, it's my time to attack, and I've got a 10 power flyer. Like, I can see these kind of things happening, especially in white where you can make a ton of tokens. Forget about it. Forget about it.
Yeah,
So
I like
I
him a
just see
lot.
like a fun. Yeah, I like them a lot. I do think there's some like crazy things you could put in here, and just think, okay, if I had 2 of them, it would be fantastic. And
I got 2 words for you, Cory. Bird bard. Best bird type or
that's
best
it.
creature type. Bird bard.
I was actually already sold on this when I just saw the art before I even knew what it was, just based off of him and his little loot. I was like, yep, I'm sold. Got it 100%.
Yeah, he's cute.
But
He has a loot. He gets the boot of
yeah, I
approval.
was gonna say,
Of
there you go.
approval.
He's cute. He's got a loot to boot.
Nice.
All right. So I think that brings us to the end of our discussion on Bloomburrow. So let's hop into question of the week, card of the week, and then we are going to head on out of here. So question of the week this week comes from Dr. Timor. Cool. Hey, thanks, Doc. So
Thanks, Doc.
the question The question of the week is going to be relating to creature types. I thought this would be a good fit for the episode.
Cool.
Do you think we'll ever see creature type / guild identities as well formed in the shards and wedges as we do in the color pairs? So I think, when we look at Bloomburrow, obviously a lot of these creature types tie back to the Ravnica kind of pairings. Now, there are some like 3 color types, like we just literally talked about Zinnia. Zinnia is a 3 color type, but the birds are Azorius, right? So do you think we're ever going to get to the point where you're going to see like, hey, Grixis on the same level as a Rakdos or Dimir, I guess, and how well defined that playstyle is?
How well defined the yeah, I mean, I think we're slowly either getting away from that point or getting closer to it. It's like I feel like there are there's clear goals. So if you look like look at a deck like a Jund deck that is black, red, and green, it's often removing things. It's removing its own things. It's a lot of like self-sacrifice. It's you get the ramp, the growth of green, and then the destruction of black, and then the burstiness of red. And so you get to do like a lot of fun things. But I think it once you get to that 3 color point, it just kind of becomes a little bit more broad. Like you're given so many options. You maybe a little bit more outlet for and I don't mean this like the monocolor deck is less creative, but it's like when you're playing with more colors, you just have a larger card pool. So, you could have a more diverse deck just by the means of having more colors. Because like I have a lot of monocolor decks that I'm like, oh, I've dug through every single black card and I know, this is an extremely unique, black deck. But it's like at the end of the day, having more colors allows you to be more broad. And so I think you can maybe I don't think it'll be as defined just because the overlap there it gets a little bit hazy. But I think there are obviously like themes that all the colors either contribute to or benefit from that allow you to take like a deck in that direction. But for instance, there's also like, why is there no Jund neg 1 counters? Because everybody wants to do like Hepatra and the Scorpion God, or like something, like they're eventually they could just take off in that direction. But I think it limits them maybe. So I don't think so. But thanks for the question.
Yeah.
What do you think, Cory?
I think it comes back to like a design principle as well, right? So we've talked before about like Mark Rosewater. He puts like out his Tumblr blog where he'll tease stuff for upcoming sets. One of the things he brought up with Bloomburrow, since we're talking Bloomburrow, was it's a lot easier to design the first giraffe creature than it is to design the 10th mouse. And the reason is when you get to the 10th mouse, you've already really honed in and defined what that creature type or what that arc or what that theme is defined by. Whereas when you're creating something brand new, it's a lot more open-ended. Like there's not a set of parameters that says, okay, well, your rats are going to be, in these colors. They're going to have to do with buffing each other up, or they're going to do with mill or whatever, So when you look at like the shards and the wedges, and even more so, I think when you get into like 4 colors and 5 colors,
right?
Because you see less commanders in those colors, they're less defined than we kind of know what mono red's all about. We kind of know what mono white and mono black and all the single colors are all about. And then we kind of know what all the dual colors are all about because we see it so prevalently, like we see it so often. And also we've literally visited Ravnica however many times. We've visited there multiple times, which has really shaped our understanding of what those pairings do together. So it's the same principle, right? So if you were to go and look up, Jund, I don't know how many Jund commanders there are. I'm going to venture to say that there are less Jund commanders than there are of any of the 2 pairings that are in there. There's going to be less Jund commanders than there are Gruul, than there are Golgari, than there are Rakdos.
Right.
So it's naturally going to be less defined. It's going to take little pieces from everything, but I don't think you're ever going to get to the point where you go, Jund is solely this super honed in the same way that like the 2 color pairings are. And like I said, you get into a 4 color pairing, good luck. You know, the only thing you might look at is if it's a 4 color pairing without white, you might go, well, it's not going to be a life linking angel. And that might be, you know, it might be more defined by what it isn't than what it could be. I don't know that we ever get to the point where the shards and wedges are as hyper defined, but I do think we're at a point now where you can kind of throw a dart at a board and get a feeling for what it would be. Like you could probably design a commander right now and go, yeah, that feels like a Grixis commander because it has to do a lot with like forcing opponents to sacrifice, or that feels like a Jeskai commander because it has to do with like tokens, or it has to do with like card draw or something like that. Like, so you might be able to get feelings for what these things would be, but I don't know that we ever get to like a defined, like this is Jeskai and no other color pairings or color wedges.
I agree with you. I mean, I feel like that we had similar points there. So sorry, Doc, but the opinion stands.
But hey, thank you for leaving a question of the week. If you guys would like to leave a question of the week, you can do so down in the comments below. We do try and answer as many of them as we can, whether that's up here on the podcast itself or if it's just directly down in the comments. So send them out there. I can tell you that I, at least when the new episodes come up, I try and answer as many of the comments as I can. Sometimes I'm not always the best about it, but where there's possibility to do so, I will do so. Cole, what do we got for card of the week?
Yeah, so there were a lot of options for card of the week. There were some very cute cards. There were some very fun cards. There were some very usable cards. But one card I think really stood out to me as being pretty good, pretty fun, and pretty cute. And that's going to be for 3 colorless, 1 white. This is a Bloomburrow Salvation Swan. That's right, it's a bird cleric. He is flash. He's a 3/3. He's a flyer. And when Salvation Swan or another bird you control ETBs, you exile one other creature you control without flying, and you return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with a flying counter on it at the beginning of the next end step. So by itself, with no other birds in your deck, this is going to save your commander and give it flying. It's going to upgrade. I mean, unless you're playing a flying commander, in which case, turn off the podcast. This doesn't apply to you. But then once you start getting a few more birds, you know, you're just upgrading your army, and they're birds, you know, entering the battlefield. It's not like you have to cast birds. So you can like blink birds. You can just blink Salvation Swan if you want. It's a cute card. It's a good card. It's a fun card. It's the card of the week. What do you think, Cory?
I completely agree. I think this card reminds me a lot of Luminous Broodmoth from back in the day. Which it also, by the way, happens to be in Bloomburrow as like a special guest card. I kind of like this a lot more. You know, I think it's probably more accessible than Luminous Broodmoth because I remember that card being like $50, $60 at some point, and then coming way down. You know what's weird is it's in a set that cares so much about creature type because you're like, oh yeah, I've got so many birds and there's bird commanders that care about birds and stuff like that. But you almost don't want this card in a bird deck because of how many things already have flying. But I do think that this is a great card to have in white. Like you said, if your commander doesn't have flying, it's an instant upgrade. Because I don't know anybody that is like, oh no, my commander was given flying. This sucks. Like, no, I'll take flying in a heartbeat.
Yeah, that's a good point about not really wanting to play this in a bird deck because everything probably has flying. But I stand by that blinking Salvation Swan is probably good.
Oh yeah, for sure. But hey, there we go. That is card of the week. Just one quick announcement real quick before we get out of here. So I will be at Gen Con next weekend. I'm not necessarily doing, well, I am doing a couple Magic the Gathering events. So I will be at the Unknown event draft. I'll also be doing a Bloomburrow art preview. Not that I'm actively involved in it, but I will be in the audience somewhere. So if you want to say hi, you want to go pick up a game, I'm going to be carrying at least a deck or two on me. So you can always stop me and we can try and arrange some time to play games. Mostly Sunday, I'll be playing Magic the Gathering. So that's probably the best time to catch me. But I do just want to let you know I'm there. If you guys want to stop and say hi, I will be more than happy to say hi, catch a game with you, talk to you for a minute. We always love meeting you guys when we go to events, so it is really kind of a cool opportunity that we can all hang out and go from there. But that brings us to the end of today's episode. If you want to follow Cole, you can reach out to him at loveandmana.mtg. You can follow me at sleevecard, or you can reach out to the podcast directly at ErCastPod or contact.urcast@gmail.com. Those are all great and viable options if you want to leave question of the weeks, suggestions for card of the week, if you want to leave deck lists that you want us to check out, any of that kind of good stuff, you can do so at any of those handles or contact locations. But thank you for making it to the end of today's episode. Have yourselves a magical Friday, and we'll see you next week.
Bye, guys.